Tonight on PrimeTime, the Gulf on edge. Iran warns it will set fire to ships attempting to pass through the strategic Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, Washington insists its campaign is limited to destroying Iran's missile and naval capabilities, denying any intent to target civilian infrastructure. The ripple effects of this war continue. Good evening. Iran has warned it will set fire to any ships trying to pass through the strategic Strait of Hormuz and target Gulf shipping, a vital route for global oil. Well, since the conflict, oil prices have risen and shipping traffic through the passage has dropped significantly due to security risks. While Washington says its mission is focused on destroying Iran's missile and naval capabilities, insisting it is not targeting civilian infrastructure.
Iran has warned that US military bases in the Gulf could be targeted as the air campaign enters its third day. Tehran has also declared the Strait of Hormuz closed, threatening to fire on ships attempting to pass. US Central Command says the waterway remains open, but energy markets are already on edge. Around 1/5 of the world's oil supply normally moves through the narrow channel. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said Tehran does not want the conflict to spread, but argued that American facilities across the region are within reach.
When the United States attacks us, whether by fighter jets or the ships it deploys, they have access to our territory to strike with all kinds of missiles and aircraft. We cannot reach their territory, but we can reach their bases. I think those bases are legitimate targets.
He also urged neighboring governments to pressure Washington rather than Tehran. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claimed the campaign would not become an endless war, but acknowledged it could take time.
I said it could be quick and decisive. It may take some time, but it's not going to take years. It's not an endless war. In fact, it's an effort right now to achieve the peace that we all yearn and pray for. And I think together we'll achieve it.
In Washington, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the operation is limited to destroying Iran's ballistic missile and naval capabilities. Secretary of State Marco Rubio echoed that objective.
That said, we would not mind, we would not be heartbroken, and we hope that the Iranian people can overthrow this government and establish a new future for that country. We would love for that to be possible. But the objective of this mission is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities and of their naval capabilities.
Rubio also responded to Iranian reports that a school in Manab was struck, reportedly killing civilians. He said the United States would not deliberately target a school and that the military is reviewing the incident. On the ground, the US military says it has struck more than 1,250 targets inside Iran and destroyed all 11 Iranian vessels operating in the Gulf of Oman. 6 American service members have been killed and 18 injured. Iranian authorities say at least 555 people have been killed across 131 cities, though those figures have not been independently verified. Washington says 49 senior Iranian leaders, including Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, were killed in the opening strikes.
Okay, to make sense of all of this, joining us now is our very own Anastasia Lavrina. Anastasia, good to have you with us in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
My goodness me, so many things converging here. Casualties rising, leaders offering relatively conflicting signals about the duration of the war. Give us your analysis, please. Is there any realistic path left, do you think, to de-escalation?
Well, that's a very good question, Guy. What we are witnessing now, the situation is indeed escalating. It's going far beyond previous rounds of tension in the Gulf. The pace of developments, the scale of military activity, and the number of actors directly or indirectly involved make this moment fundamentally different. This is no longer a contained confrontation between just the United States, Israel, and Iran. It has evolved into a regional stress test with clear global economic implications. The latest developments around the Strait of Hormuz illustrate this shift clearly. Iran has declared the strait closed and threatened to fire on vessels attempting to transit. At the same time, United States insists the waterway remains open. Technically, some commercial traffic continues, but the more important question is not whether the strait is physically sealed, it is whether it is operationally viable and insurable. Shipping companies make decisions based on risk calculations, not political statements. If tankers are harassed, if missiles or drones are launched in proximity, if naval escorts become necessary, and if insurance premiums surge dramatically, traffic slows or diverts. In that sense, a choke point can become functionally restricted without a formal blockade. Even isolated incidents can generate outsized effects because energy markets react to uncertainty immediately. Iran's threat is credible, not because it can indefinitely close the strait, but because it can destabilize it. The geography favors asymmetric tactics. The channel is narrow. Coastal missile batteries, drones, fast attack boats, or even limited mining operations could inject enough uncertainty to and definitely can deter commercial transit. Iran doesn't need to stop every vessel, it only needs to raise the risk their halt. At the same time, a sustained and total closure would come at a heavy price for Tehran. Iran's own exports depend on regional stability, and a prolonged shutdown would almost certainly provoke a coordinated multinational naval effort to reopen the corridor. Historically, freedom of navigation in this waterway has been threatened as a strategic red line by major powers. For that reason, a long-term blockade remains unlikely. Short, disruptive episodes are far more plausible. The economic consequences will be immediate. Roughly 1/5 of global oil supply and a significant share of liquefied natural gas pass through this corridor daily. Even temporary disruption tightens supply expectations, pushes oil prices, high increased transport costs, and feeds inflation across manufacturing chains. Asia is particularly exposed due to its dependence on Gulf energy imports. At the same time, Europe, already sensitive to energy volatility, would also feel renewed pressure. Emerging markets would likely face the hardest economic strain, but maritime tension is only one layer of the crisis. Iran has warned that United States military installations across the Gulf are legitimate targets. American bases are distributed across multiple countries, and any high casualty strike on one of them will dramatically escalate the conflict. Limited attacks designed as signaling mechanisms remain possible, but in a dense operational environment where multiple forces are active, the risk of miscalculation is substantial. Washington continues to describe its campaign as limited, focused on degrading missile and naval capabilities rather than reshaping Iran politically. The Pentagon has emphasized that this is not intended to become an endless war and that there are no plans for a large-scale ground operation. President Trump has reiterated that American forces and maritime trade routes will be defended decisively, while also stating that the United States doesn't seek broader regional war. However, the broader context complicates this framing. The death of Iran's supreme leader has introduced a new degree of unpredictability inside Iran itself. Leadership transitions during external confrontation can alter strategic behavior. Internal political consolidation, elite competition, or public mobilization may shift the calculus in ways that are difficult for outside actors to anticipate. That adds a layer of uncertainty that didn't exist before. Across the Gulf, governments are strengthening security around energy facilities and foreign military bases while publicly calling for de-escalation. So Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are particularly sensitive to any threat to oil infrastructure. Qatar, Kuwait, or Bahrain remain cautious, aware that their territory hosts strategic assets. Iraq faces internal strain due to the presence of both American forces and Iranian allied groups. So the longer the confrontation persists, the harder it becomes for these states to remain insulated. The crisis has also drawn wider strategic attention, let's say NATO consultations, including discussions between the Secretary General and President of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, that signal the alliance views the situation not simply as a Middle Eastern dispute, but as a matter affecting alliance security. The concern extends beyond battlefield dynamics to spillover risks. Energy disruption, refugee flows, attacks on aligned assets, and broader regional instability. Turkey occupies a particularly sensitive position, geographically close to the theater and maintaining diplomatic channels with multiple actors. The emphasis on diplomacy alongside reaffirmed collective defense reflects a dual approach. Contain instability without being drawn into direct military engagement, but global reactions underscore the stakes. The United Nations has called for immediate de-escalation, warning that the region cannot absorb another full-scale war. The United Kingdom and European governments have emphasized the protection of maritime trade and the need to prevent wider economic fallout. China is closely monitoring developments due to its reliance on Gulf energy supplies, while Russia has criticized Western military actions while also calling for negotiations. And despite differing geopolitical perspectives, there is a broad recognition that sustained instability could trigger a wider regional confrontation and significant economic shock. Against this backdrop, the sustainability of the campaign itself becomes increasingly uncertain. Casualties are rising, target lists are expanding, political messaging from all sides is more layered and at times contradictory. In the short term, operations can continue. In the medium term, sustainability depends on whether objectives remain narrow and whether escalation remains controlled. The contradiction is clear. The operation is described as limited, yet the scale of strikes and the ripple effects across the region suggest something more expansive. The broader and longer the campaign becomes, the greater the incentive for asymmetric retaliation, including shipping disruption or indirect regional escalation. If you ask me if there's still a realistic path to de-escalation, yes, but it depends on discipline and clearly maintained boundaries. First, military objectives must remain defined and limited. If actions continue to be framed strictly in security terms rather than political transformation, space for contempt remains. The second is discrete communication channels must stay active. Even adversaries in open confrontation rely on indirect dialogue to clarify red lines and prevent tactical incidents from escalating into strategic crisis. And the third key thresholds must not be crossed. Sustained closure of major maritime choke points, deliberate targeting of political leadership, or high casualty events involving foreign forces will sharply reduce diplomatic maneuverability. And the last but not least, external diplomatic pressure matters. When global actors consistently call for restraint and emphasize economic consequences, they increase the political cost of prolonged confrontation. At present, the conflict stands at a delicate balance point. It's no longer a narrow standoff, it's a multi-layers crisis affecting deterrence, credibility, alliance cohesion, regional security, and global energy stability. The Strait of Hormuz sits at the center of this equation, both a physical choke point and a strategic layer. The greatest risk is not necessarily a dramatic overnight shutdown or a single decisive strike. It's sustained instability that gradually reshapes energy flows, investor confidence, and regional security architecture. That's what actually makes this moment more consequential than previous episodes of escalation. The window for containment remains open, but with each exchange, the margin for strategic errors grows thinner.
Multi-layered analysis for a multi-layered situation. Anastasia, we thank you very much indeed for that.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Okay, staying on topic now, and an official Israeli source has told A News that the overarching strategy in Iran is to remove what it calls any existential threat to the state of Israel. Well, Israel says its campaign targets Iran's nuclear program, ballistic missiles, and proxies including Hezbollah, aiming to remove what it calls existential threats. Now, the source added that Israel distinguishes between the regime and the Iranian people. Well, meanwhile, Tehran has condemned the US and Israeli strikes as violations of international law, calling them acts of aggression and rejecting the justification from Washington and Tel Aviv. US President Donald Trump said on Monday he had ordered the attack on Iran to thwart Tehran's nuclear developments and a ballistic missile program that he said was growing rapidly. He signaled that Iran operation could extend beyond the initial 4 to 5 week timeline.
Today, the United States military continues to carry out large-scale combat operations in Iran to eliminate the grave threats posed to America by this terrible terrorist regime. Following our obliteration of Iran's nuclear program in Operation Midnight Hammer a short while ago, we warned Iran not to make any attempt to rebuild at a different location because they were unable to use the ones that we so powerfully blew up. But they ignored those warnings and refused to cease their pursuit of nuclear weapons. In addition, the regime's conventional ballistic missile program was growing rapidly and dramatically, and this posed a very clear, colossal threat to America and our forces stationed overseas.
Well, joining us now is Lieutenant General Marco Serrona of Portugal, who's been closely following the military implications of the escalating Middle East crisis and assessing what the expanding US campaign against Iran means from a strategic and operational perspective. General, welcome to Primetime. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. President Trump says the strikes were aimed at eliminating Iran's nuclear and rapidly expanding ballistic missile programs, doesn't he? From a military standpoint, though, how decisive would such operations need to be to truly neutralize all those capabilities?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me today. So let's see. As we know, the capabilities to build missiles, ballistic missiles, is huge in Iran. It's a lot of factories, a lot of places where they storage the missiles, the places where they launch the missiles. So it's a huge infrastructure that to be destroyed will take time for sure. It's not an easy way. So concerning the nuclear infrastructure, that is the other point that was mentioned both by the US and by Israel. It's also difficult because we know that from the last operation in June, the Iranians have put a lot of effort in sheltering the infrastructure again, build new infrastructures to remove the enrichment stuff that they have to enrich uranium from the place that have been targeted to other places. So it will be difficult and have to different from last June. have to be monitored from the ground to see if the infrastructure is really destroyed. Something that we are not sure that has been done in last operation. So these two points are very important, because it's the two main points that lead to the strategic concept of Israel of the threat could be existential. So that's we have other operational targets that they have, the issue of the navy of the Revolutionary Guard that could have military operations to close the Hormuz Strait, what is a problem. But nevertheless, even to close the strait, the Iranians, it's something strange, but that it's true. They don't need to target anything. It is just a threat. Just a threat is enough because you know that the insurance companies are asking for huge prices, premium price for the transportation. So it's something that is blocking the reality in the ground or in the sea. In this case, is that the only ships that are crossing the strait are the Iranian ships, because they know that nobody is going to target them. So they are crossing the strait, and that is another point. We have, of course, also the issue of the regime change. That is something that is more important for Israel, I suppose, that for the United States. Nevertheless, it's something that we have to see how it's going to happen. But never. The point is that Israel and the United States are targeting also and bombing a lot the Iranian Guard infrastructure,
and
land component.
General Serona, sorry to cut in, but just it's very interesting this, because you touched on the potential economic devastation and those ripple effects that we're starting to see now. Everybody is asking about the timeline. You know, we've heard 4 to 5 weeks. Some analysts are saying, no, actually, it's likely that the US and Israel will get out sooner because it's sort of the optics look better. Other analysts are saying, no, it's going to be a much more sustained campaign. Can the world afford a sustained campaign? Because, you know, if drones are flying into the space of Gulf countries and the world's busiest international airport can't reopen properly, I mean, that's something that cannot be sustained for 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 weeks, is it?
Let's see. We have experienced wars in the past that last 6 months. So in the same place, or in the same area, more or less. So that is not issue, I suppose. Let's see. We have the initial calculations from the military planning side in the US. They work for something around 8,000 missiles of different categories, different forms. So, and that. For them, everybody knows that the Iranians are going, and they've been using the missiles almost 200, 300 a day in some occasions, and so it's something that we could, even with the destruction of the sites, the storage sites, and the destruction of the launchers, 8,000 could be 40 days or something like that. So it's a calculation. But the problem that we are going to see, I suppose, is that most probably, and China already told that they are going to support Iranians in the military in the military stuff, so to speak. So it's the calculation could be wrong, due to several realities in the ground. One of them is the possible support of not only China but other countries that could support the Iranians in the operation, in the defensive operation. And the other one is the possibility of the Iranians are building more missiles and use, or have more missiles, and they have lots of drones. We know thousands of drones, and they are missing drones and ballistic missiles. So it's something. It's difficult to foresee when the operation will end. Of course, the United States said 4 to 5 weeks, and in accordance with the calculations, that could be enough. Of course, the erosion of the regime, the people, the leaders, it's something that is going to also to influence the situation of the regime. So let's see. It's a lot of conditions that have to be met together to have what both the US and Israel consider that is enough under the strategic point of view to achieve the political and strategic objectives.
Now, we have had some unconfirmed reports that Israel has reportedly a building which members of the Assembly of Experts were said to be present in. If this is accurate, it suggests that the operation may have been aimed not merely at military infrastructure, but potentially at decapitating Iran's clerical leadership structure at the very highest level. I mean, we've seen that, I guess, to some degree initially, but just be interested in your thoughts.
Let's see. We know, as you said, that the Israel have bombed both the places where the experts will meet. So it's a kind of a preventive action to avoid that the clerics meet to decide. So it is also a sign from Israel that if they meet, they are in danger. So it's something that for the Iranians will be difficult to meet the conditions for to take a decision concerning the next leadership. So it's they don't use electronic means to vote. So they have to meet, and they know when they will meet in some infrastructure. Israel will know what is the place, and most probably they are going to be bombed. That's the reality of the facts. It's something that Israel has done in the past, is doing now in Iran, in Lebanon, and will do in the next opportunities that they have in the near future concerning the leadership of Iran. So it's a dilemma that Iranians have to meet or not meet, because if they know that if they meet, they will be bombed and being targeted in precision and in time.
Lieutenant General Serrano, we thank you very much indeed for your analysis, for joining us on Primetime. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Okay, after the break, we'll look at US First Lady Melania Trump's unprecedented address to the United Nations Security Council on children in conflict, and also how soaring tensions, flight cancellations, and regional instability are impacting global aviation and Middle East tourism. Don't go away. A warm welcome back to Primetime wherever you're watching. US First Lady Melania Trump chaired a meeting of the United Nations Security Council on children and education in conflict. Well, 2 days after US and Israel launched attacks on Iran that prompted a UN warning about child safety. Now, it's the first time a spouse of any serving world leader has chaired a meeting of the 15-member Security Council, the UN body charged with maintaining international peace and security. The plan was announced last week before the launch of the US and Israeli strikes. Well, just days after US and Israeli strikes on Iran prompted warnings about child safety, we're now going to look at this topic in a lot more detail. It was focused, of course, on children and protection of children across the world. Of course, the 15-member body, it was the first time that the US First Lady had chaired such a meeting. So, joining us now to discuss this is John Kavalik, Senior Editor at Issue Insight, to discuss the diplomatic and political implications of all of this. John, good to see you there. Thanks very much, as always, for joining us. Interesting topic, this. How significant is it that diplomatically that a US First Lady would chair a Security Council session?
Other than, it has the distinction of being the first, it really doesn't matter. Mrs. Trump, in the first term and into the second term, this is not a first lady who has embraced the traditional role of first lady, who is actively engaged in being first lady. And this was very performative and optical, and very much because someone came up with the idea and President Trump did it, and they made it happen.
I sense a very slight lack of enthusiasm in your voice there, John. I mean, could it be that she just does it in a different way? Would that be a fair challenge? That what she sees the role as being is perhaps not what it's been before?
No question that I think Mrs. Trump looks at the role as that of being part-time with flexible hours, where the traditional role was full-time, and it basically was whatever hours your employers asked of you. And the employers are the voters, are the citizens of the United States, both those who supported President Trump and those who, in this case, voted against him. So, again, it was a moment. It will go in the history books as the first time. But I think it's important to look at or to listen and read what she said. And if you read the text of her very brief remarks that didn't suggest her way of speaking, her inflections, or anything, it suggested, like most political speeches, written by someone else. But some of the words that were used, some of the phrases, you have to, basically, those in glass houses, or why don't you look in the mirror? Because she seemed to be talking about her husband and how he projects himself and projects the country, rather than speaking to concerns about other countries.
Yeah, interesting point there, John. And also timing as well, perhaps a sensitive area, given that the meeting focused on children in conflict just days after US strikes on Iran. Has there been any sort of comeback, any blowback on that at all?
Hasn't been thus far. The timing was, March the 1st was the 30-day, the 1-month presidency for the U.S. They rotate that through all the 15 total members of the Security Council. And so it's sort of, Monday was the beginning of that 30 days. And so, yes, the timing a little unfortunate. Now, to be fair to Mrs. Trump, she has focused on children, and one of her, it hasn't been that successful in terms of let's say numbers, but it's been successful, and that is her focus on the return of children in the Russian-Ukraine war, returning of children that are in the territory of the Russian Federation and reuniting them with their families. The numbers haven't been incredibly staggering, but if you're one family and it's one child, then that's meaningful. So, so she has, she sort of pops out with, or the White House pops her out. But unfortunately, it would be lovely if it were more consistent. She's a 55-year-old woman. She's a mother to a college attending son, and she has had some interesting life experiences, and it would be if in the final 2.5 years of her husband's final term to have her match the voice to her beauty, as some would say.
I mean, how do you think the other Security Council members, particularly those critical of the strikes, interpreted this?
And if you look at the visuals, the Security Council chamber was packed. And why? Because no member, no delegation wants to be the one that our team, led by U.S. Ambassador Walz, no one wants to be the one that Donald Trump learns wasn't there, or their ambassador wasn't there, but the deputy ambassador was there. They're scared to death of this guy. And they all know that he takes slights personally. And so if someone would drop a dime on the delegation that wasn't there or wasn't there to the level, next thing you know, he's talking about visa restrictions and sanctions and tariffs. So, and that's unfortunate, because First Lady Melania Trump's message could have been, much more, than it was, or that it is, or that it could be. But most people know that people feel like hostages when anything involves a Trump, and that's to her detriment.
John, do you think this moment reflects anything significant in terms of the strategy for how the president and his team and the First Lady and their team see the role of the First Lady in terms of her sort of global position, her global brands, the jobs, the role she's going to take going forward? Do you think that there's a clear forward-looking strategy with that regard?
You use the absolute succinct word, brand, because everything touches Trump world is about brand and about branding. And I look back at Gaza. Mrs. Trump and members of the Trump family been pretty silent when it comes to the impact of the Israeli Defense Forces activity territory of Gaza, and the death and the destruction, including of women and children. Barely anything said. And in Russia, Ukraine, other than coming out, with the children focus, and that was recently, there really hasn't been anything. So I've not in my travels come across one that said, wow, Mrs. Trump is doing so much for us, because it's fleeting. It's almost like she's in a commercial, or she's part of a commercial, and there's a program that's running, and there'll be a commercial break, and she'll pop up, do the commercial, and then go, and then we go back to the programming. And so I just don't see any true gravitas, any true weight that she leaves behind. She swoops in, elegantly dressed, elegantly coiffured, does the presentation, but leaves. During the UN General Assembly last year, she came in and to a reception on First Ladies, and literally it was 30 seconds or something, and walked in, walked out. Some of these First Ladies wanted to get pictures taken with her. Mrs. Zelenskaya, Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, she based after her to try to beg for a photo, and finally got one. So, there's just not a lot there. And I'm sure for some of these countries, listening to her words about rigidity and about, I think I'm reading one, when a nation restricts thought, it restricts its own future. The societies are filled with rigid thinkers who embrace prejudice and human dignity. And there was one, indeed, now is the time for our generation to elevate our children above ideology through access to wisdom. And if you follow politics, your head just spinning around. And you can imagine, some of the delegations sitting in the room listening to this, going, really, and your husband is criticizing us.
John, as always, it's great to see you. Thank you for swooping in, also elegantly dressed this evening with your analysis. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business news stories of the day with Andy Mioch. Stay tuned. Now let's continue with Prime Time, and Andy Mioch is here with the very latest business news stories. Andy, what's on your agenda tonight?
First up, European stocks traded sharply lower as the intensifying conflict in the Middle East continued to weigh on global investor sentiment. Banking and travel sectors were among those hardest hit.
European shares plunged to one-month lows on Tuesday as the global equities rout gathered pace. Investors were staring down the prospect of a prolonged Middle East war and the inflationary sting of a fresh jump in oil prices. The pan-European stock 600 slid 2.6%, putting it on track for its steepest one-day drop since April. If the losses hold, the benchmark would be down roughly 4% across the past two sessions. Every sector of the stock 600 was dragged into the downdraft, led by financials. The banking index sank to a near three-month low, with UK-focused lenders, seen as more exposed to Middle East risk, taking the hardest hits. Travel names remained under heavy pressure. Lufthansa dropped 4% in morning trade, while British Airways owner EAG fell 5.2% and Air France KLM slid 5%. The fear in Europe was that an energy shock will rekindle inflation while squeezing already tepid growth. With the Strait of Hormuz closed to marine traffic, attacks have disrupted commercial shipping through the Gulf. It's seen as an artery for the fuel and petroleum products Europe depends on.
On to Asian markets, where stocks resumed their sell-off. Shares fell sharply as one of the indexes saw the biggest drop in 5 months.
Japanese and South Korean shares fell at the sharpest pace in months on Tuesday as investors remained on edge for a second straight day following the US-Israeli strikes on Iran. Japan's benchmark Nikkei 225 closed at 56,279.05 points, down 3.06%, the biggest drop since November last year, after falling as much as 3.4%. In South Korea, the benchmark Korea Composite Stock Price Index closed down 7.24% to 5,791.91 points after triggering a sidecar trading curve during the session. The US-Israeli air war against Iran escalated with no end in sight, as Israel struck Lebanon in response to Hezbollah attacks and Tehran continued launching missiles and drones at Gulf states hosting US military bases.
Next up, Europe's largest defense technology group, Thales, posted better than expected annual results. The French maker of radars and digital systems reported that new orders continue to outstrip sales.
French aerospace and technology firm Thales on Tuesday reported a slightly higher than expected annual core profit, led by its main defense business and demand for avionics and space activities, and predicted higher profit margins for this year. Europe's largest defense technology group said its 2025 adjusted operating earnings climbed 14% on a like-for-like basis to 2.7 billion euros, as sales rose 8.8% to 22.1 billion euros, and the fresh order intake edged up 1% to 25.2 billion euros. Analysts were on average expecting adjusted operating income of 2.7 billion euros, on revenue of 21.8 billion euros, and an order intake of 25.2 billion euros, according to a company-compiled consensus. For 2026, the maker of military and civil radars and digital systems predicted an operating profit margin of 12.6% to 12.8%, and underlying growth in revenues of 6% to 7%, with new orders continuing to outstrip sales.
A new sort of business is booming in Asia. More than 1,500 robot rental companies opened in China last year. The robots are used for a wide range of tasks, including delivery and performing at events.
China's robot rental market is thriving as more and more companies enter the sector and push down prices. Data shows that in 2025, more than 1,500 robot rental companies were established across China, a year-on-year increase of 48% compared to the previous year. The head of one robot leasing company in Beijing has expanded his workforce, which now includes 23 humanoid robots, 12 robot dogs, and thousands of drones. The bots are being deployed to do things like deliver food, give tours at scenic spots, and perform dance routines at events.
Orders for private events have increased, such as birthday banquets, private gatherings, and tea parties. I think robots will increasingly become part of everyday life of ordinary people.
Last year, China's humanoid robot rental market was valued at about $143 million and is expected to be worth $1.4 billion this year.
And finally, there's some news for tech-savvy pet owners from the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. A company presented a collar-mounted pet phone, allowing you to talk to your pet and vice versa remotely.
A cat phoning home during its afternoon stroll no longer sounds like a cartoon gag. GlocalMe demonstrated its pet phone, a collar-mounted smartphone for pets, on Tuesday at Mobile World Congress, showcasing two-way voice interaction and behavior recognition features aimed at anxious owners. The device can detect actions such as barking or agitation and alert users, enabling them to speak to their pets remotely or even see where they are with the integrated camera. The company says the pet phone integrates health tracking and multi-layer GPS, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth location technology to help owners monitor pets in real time. During a live demo, CEO Chao Hui Chen simulated a pet jumping to trigger an automatic call, showing that 3 jumps initiate the call.
And on that note, that's all we have for you in the business brief for tonight. Back to you, Guy.
Andy, our 2 dogs, Rocky and Buddy, we love them very much. They are, though, I think, probably the worst behaved dogs in the whole South Caucasus region. But perhaps I've been missing a trick. Perhaps getting them a phone could be the answer.
There you go.
Thank you very much indeed, Andy. Okay, after the break, we'll examine how any US control over Iranian territory could shape global power dynamics, with nearly 70% of China's oil imports passing through the Gulf. Beijing's energy security could be on the line. Stay with us. A warm welcome back to Primetime. Now, nearly 70% of China's oil imports transit through the Gulf region. So the impact of the war in the Middle East raises serious questions about Beijing's energy security and strategic calculations. Well, joining us now is Togrul Keskin, professor at the China Global Strategic Research Institute in Almaty, Kazakhstan. Professor, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, we're not used to talking about China in terms of vulnerability. We're used to talking about its great power, its great strength. Nevertheless, how vulnerable do you think China is to this war, particularly from the perspective of energy security?
Thank you for having me. I mean, if you look at this geopolitics calmly, beyond slogans, this conflict between the United States and China, this is not simply about Iran. Let's not forget. It's about the architecture of the Euro-Asian energy and structural tension between the United States and China. Some portion of the China's imported crude oil comes from either directly from Iran through the Persian Gulf and Strait Hormuz, and China's broader energy security depends heavily on the Gulf suppliers, such as Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, and UAE. Much of this oil must pass through the maritime checkpoints where the United States maintains overwhelming naval superiority. So this is very important. This is why Beijing has invested in diversification and through the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, announced in Kazakhstan in 2013 actually, has expanded pipeline connection to Russia and Central Asia, specifically Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, and strengthened ties with the Gulf monarchies and depended on its partnership with Iran through long-term energy and infrastructure agreements.
Do you think...
War against Iran, yeah.
Sorry, Professor, sorry to cut in, but it's very interesting. Do you think that, nevertheless, despite the diversification, that if restrictions continue to bite over an extended period, do you think that might bring Beijing in some way into this conflict? Not necessarily militarily, but it might cause it to think about possible actions, pressure that it could apply?
I don't think China will respond directly to this conflict, either in the Middle East or in Central Asia. This is created by the Washington containment policy, Washington, D.C. in 2018 at the Hudson Institute, October 4th, and announced by the former Vice President of the Mike Pence. So containment of the China policy continues. But I am not sure how Beijing will respond to this. Probably is diversifying its energy and oil interests and gas interests in the world. I'm not sure how long it will continue this, but this conflict between the United States and China, unfortunately, will dominate second quarter of the 20th till the 2050. One side, we see the hegemon, the United States, trying to contain the China. On the other side, we see the China admiration for the global South. So it will be difficult next 25 years for the world and world economy, actually. This is not about Iran. This is not about Israel, actually. If you look at since October 7th, how the Hamas attacked the Israeli civilians, since then, world is changing. But these changes comes from directly related with the US-China conflict. And China needs for the oil and gas and energy. Yeah.
And Professor, as you suggest, this diversification is accelerating anyway, irrespective of the recent war, the recent crisis in the Middle East. Just give us a sense of the scale of this diversification, because this is not just a small piece of R&D, is it? This is a huge strategic initiative. Of course, Central Asia, South Caucasus, many other actors involved. Just give us a sense of the scale, please.
I mean, the scale is like a globalization, actually. As globalization which has been taking place since the collapse of the Soviet Union. This is one of the most important events probably in the 20th and 21st century, this conflict, China and US conflict. Probably now it's kind of called soft Cold War, but I hope it's not going to turn to the real war, especially in the South China Sea in Taiwan. If the United States attacks certain provocate against China. And probably if Washington gained the control over Iranian territory, for example, it will do three things simultaneously. It will reshape the balance of the power in the Middle East. It's not good for the China. Second, it will put in direct pressure on China's energy security. It's not good for China. It will intensify great power rivalry in Eurasia, means Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and through Azerbaijan and Turkey. So this will not remain in regional intervention. It will escalate the structural competition between the United States and China globally, actually.
And Professor, you're speaking to us from Kazakhstan, one of the countries you mentioned there. Just talk to us about the specific role that countries like Kazakhstan, other countries in Central Asia too, are playing and will continue to play in this diversification that you describe.
I mean, Kazakhstan, I think under Tokayev government, the Kasım Tokayev government, Kazakhstan is playing very well, balancing between United States, Russia, and China. Let's not forget, President Tokayev speaks fluent Chinese. He was invited by the Beijing. He visited China 2 times last 3 months. But he also visited United States 3 times last 4 months and speaks fluent English. And he visited Russia, Moscow, met with the Putin and speak with the Russian president in Russian. So Kazakhstan, I think, is playing very good balanced role, and it should be the example for the other countries, actually, not getting involved in this big rivalry between the United States and China. And some countries in Central Asia, including Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, including Azerbaijan, basically, might be benefited from this conflict if they have a balanced role between the United States and China, actually. It will benefit for the development, modernization, employment, technological modernization as well.
Very interesting indeed. And I know we've touched on this already, but is it your hypothesis that whatever happens with this conflict that we're seeing now between the US, Israel and Iran, that actually China will remain resolute in its position not to get dragged into the conflict?
I mean, China's long-term foreign policy is based on the non-interventionism. China never invaded and occupied any countries, unlike the United States, actually. United States occupied Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and tried to overthrow the different governments around the world, including the Venezuela, Maduro, actually. So China did not do this and will continue not to involve any foreign countries' conflict, basically, from my own perspective.
Professor Keskin, it's been great to have you on the show, and we really appreciate your analysis. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Okay, after the break, we'll be checking in with our correspondents all around the world for the very latest developments in their regions. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Primetime. Now, continuing the topic we were discussing before the break of Azerbaijan, hundreds of foreign nationals are leaving Iran via Azerbaijan's Astara border crossing amid security concerns. Since Saturday, over 900 people have crossed, with more expected in the coming days. The evacuations come after US and Israeli strikes on Iran and Tehran's missile retaliations across the region. Our correspondent Gulcin Holjalieva reports now from the scene.
The Astara state border checkpoint has emerged as a major humanitarian corridor as civilians and foreign nationals flee escalating tensions in Iran. Since Saturday, more than 750 people have been evacuated through the crossing, including citizens from nearly 20 countries. Large groups of Chinese, Russian and Pakistani nationals are among those arriving, with evacuations continuing daily under close coordinations between border authorities and diplomatic missions. 4 staff members of the Embassy of Switzerland in Iran were evacuated via Astara, along with members of the Embassy of Russia in Iran. The diplomatic teams crossed safely and expressed gratitude to Azerbaijan for facilitating their departure. The surge follows the Azerbaijani government's decision to open the checkpoint to allow stranded nationals to leave Iran amid ongoing military operations by the United States and Israel. On the ground, crossings remain steady. Border officials continue processing arrivals throughout the day as embassies coordinate further evacuations. As regional instability deepens, Astara has transformed from a quiet frontier town into a critical exit route for those seeking safety beyond Iran's border. Gulcin Hojaleva, Nijat Kasumov, A-News.
Well, moving to Iran now, and in Tehran, part of the historic Golestan Palace has reportedly been damaged following a nearby bombing on the second day of the US-Israel invasion of Iran. Iranian officials say the conflict could extend beyond the countries directly involved and have described the war as likely to be prolonged. Our correspondent has more now from Tehran.
I'm reporting from Golestan Palace, a cultural heritage site in downtown Tehran, which was partially destroyed when a nearby government building was bombed on the second day of US-Israel invasion of Iran on Sunday. In a new development, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, in a televised interview, said Iran had warned that the US-Israel invasion of Iran will not be limited to these countries, and the war will extend to other countries in the region. He urged the regional countries to pressure the United States for not using its bases on these countries' soils to attack Iran. He said Iran was not surprised when United States and Israel attacked Iran once again in the middle of negotiations, and said that United States betrayed the negotiating table. In another development, Iran's top security official, Ali Larijani, said that the war with US and Israel will be a prolonged one. In a message on X, he said that this war will be a long war. Earlier, he had said that Iran will not be negotiating with the United States after US President Donald Trump said that Iran has approached the US side for negotiation and de-escalation. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, Foreign News.
Moving on to Central Asia, and Kazakhstan says it is stepping up efforts to complete the investigation into Azal plane crash. Officials insist the final conclusions will be based strictly on verified evidence as international examinations continue. Our correspondent from Almaty has more.
In Kazakhstan, officials have pledged to accelerate the investigation into the crash of the Azal aircraft. The Minister of Transport says the commission handling the case is making every effort to complete its work as quickly as possible. Investigators are currently reviewing expert assessments and detailed technical reports. Authorities stress that the conclusions will be objective and based strictly on verified facts. Transport Minister Nurlan Saurambayev has previously stated that the final report will only be published after data is received from 2 foreign laboratories. Those results are still pending. At the same time, a modular avionics unit from the aircraft has been sent to the US manufacturer Honeywell International for examination. This was confirmed by Deputy Prime Minister Kanat Bozumbayev, who heads the commission. The crash has also been discussed at the diplomatic level. Russia's Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Overchuk said after talks with Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev that Moscow and Baku agreed on next steps related to the disaster. The aircraft was traveling from Baku to Grozny when it crashed in western Kazakhstan on December 25, 2024. There were 67 people on board, including 62 passengers and 5 crew members. 29 survived the crash. And according to preliminary findings cited by officials, the aircraft crashed as a result of physical and technical external interference that occurred in Russian airspace over Grozny. On the 9th of October 2025, Russian President Vladimir Putin said the aircraft had been within the range of Russian air defense systems. He stated that 2 missiles detonated near the plane while intercepting Ukrainian drones, and that this led to the crash. Russia has said it's ready to provide additional information to investigators and to pay compensation to those affected. Fariza Kalimurtina, Almaty, E-News.
Back to the Middle East now, and Israeli forces have moved to secure strategic positions along the border as tensions escalate in the Middle East. Attacks between Israel, Iran and Hezbollah have already displaced tens of thousands in Lebanon, with new threats emerging for the wider region, including Cyprus and parts of Europe. Our Maria Rodriguez Abalde has more now from Tel Aviv in Israel.
Israeli troops advance on strategic positions to create a buffer zone along the border. The Lebanese army withdrew from its post to ensure the safety of its personnel. Israel stated that it seeks to prevent attacks against its border cities. Meanwhile, Israel launched simultaneous attacks in Tehran and Beirut against Iranian and Hezbollah military targets. The Shiite movement responded with drones and rockets against 3 Israeli bases. The bombings have already displaced at least 30,000 people in Lebanon, according to the UN. 4 ballistic missile attacks from Iran happened this morning. Some fragments damaged several buildings here in Tel Aviv. Israeli emergency responders treated at least 3 injured people. The war in the Middle East is spreading across the region, and at the same time, it's becoming clear for Trump that it's maybe too late to negotiate it. Netanyahu insists on the strong alliance he has now and how both of them are determined to continue with their plan. Saudi Arabia is expected to attack Iran soon after they were attacked yesterday, according to a senior Israeli official. The threat over Cyprus is maybe the biggest surprise in this conflict. That would already imply a threat to the European Union and NATO. Greece is installing anti-aircraft missiles on the island of Carpathos after Hezbollah's attack.
And finally tonight, as Azerbaijan marks Fire Tuesday, the second of the 4 Tuesdays leading to Novruz, communities light flames to symbolise renewal, courage and the casting off of the old. It's a tradition rooted in purification and hope, reminding all of us that brighter days begin with a spark. Well, that is all for Prime Time for tonight. Have a very good evening indeed.